instead of inside-out thoughts. We don't have to ascribe meanings to anything. There's no ascribed meanings to anything. There's no set conditions that we have to act this way when something else happens. It opens us up to prosperity. It opens us up to ideas of love, relationships, of being kind to our kids, seeing the good in them when they're not demonstrating that back to you. It's not a quid pro quo like everybody's been talking about lately. It's not something that we have to receive something back from them. We just simply have to love them where they are and allow that to be part of who we are. That's everybody in the world. Who needs more love than Mr. Trump? So why are we unable to love him? Who needs more love than Mr. Trump? So that's part of what we have to do. We have to love him. We have to love those neighbors that we don't like, that seem unlovable. We don't have to receive something love back from them. We can allow it to transpire at the point to where they are. So we describe these meanings. We describe these thoughts, these feelings. And self-awareness is starting to recognize the underlying feelings that result from these ideas that come into our head about things, about people. It's sitting down, being reflective, taking a breath, and allowing ourselves to see that breath, to see that thought, to see that feeling that we're feeling, and to see it in a different light, to see it from all sides. What we're now allowing ourselves to do is we feel our feelings because we said God gave us tribulations. We have to feel tribulations. That's not true. God doesn't send you tribulations. You create tribulations in your life. The process is like this. Take a breath. You examine those feelings and start thinking about it differently. How's that feeling showing up? I'll give you some examples. When we have a car that cuts us off on the freeway, we get mad. Isn't that so? Isn't that what you expect to happen? We get mad at them. But is that the way we should react? If we're on the side of the street and an empty taxi goes roaring by, though we're frantically waving our hands, we're furious. Isn't that what's expected? But that's outside-in thinking. There's no ascribed thoughts or reactions to what happens in our lives. We assign those things to it. And we can make a different choice. Self-awareness allows us to see beyond those thoughts, those opportunities to learn. Beyond those ideas that block us from our good, from living from within to without. See, God is in here and in you. There's a definition that Eric Butterworth gives to God. He says, God is a sphere whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. is a sphere whose center is everywhere. That means he's in you and in me. Isn't that what omnipresence means? Whose circumference is nowhere. If that God is in everybody, how are they showing up differently to us? The very people we know that need the love should be receiving our love. And you see the presidential debates when we had one of our great spiritual leaders say that we can't beat darkness with anything other than love. Shine a light on it. But how do we get there? How do we allow ourselves to see it in that light? Well, there are a number of ways to do it. Early in my life, I had a sister who had an alcoholic problem. She used to call me up every single day with complaining that I had ruined her life, that I was responsible. And she would yell it and cuss it and say it in a lot of different languages that I would not understand. So I simply put the phone down on the counter. She died a few years of her alcoholism. She was 5 years younger than I am. So I would put the phone on the counter, and I would pick it up when she stopped. And I would say, I love you, sister. I hope tomorrow is a better day. We don't have to argue with people that aren't able to hear us. We can see and love them where they are. So there are a number of tools we can use to do this. One of the ones I've used, and I'll name the ones I use, there's many more. I used a mastermind group. Anybody heard of a mastermind group? It's where you get 4 or 5 or 6 people in a circle. And you state the problem in the middle of that group out loud. And it could be a person, a prosperity issue. It could be any issue. It could be a person. In my experience, it was a person. I had to learn to accept someone that seemed unacceptable to me. And I worked on it. When you put the problem out there, everybody in the group says an affirmative prayer about that problem to support you. And then for a month until the next meeting, everyone says an affirmative prayer supporting you in the group. I'm not changing them. I'm changing me. I'm changing the way I react with that person because I'm describing everything about that person. The uncomfortableness, the anxiety, all that's coming from me, not from them. The complaints were to teach me, not to cause anxiety. But you seem to relish in that anxiety. It took about 2 meetings before I started seeing it in a different light. When she came to complain to me at work, I simply took that complaint inside. I quietly discerned what I needed to learn from that complaint. then I would thank her for that complaint. You know, a funny thing happened. She quit complaining to me. My goal wasn't to change her, it was to change me. It takes two people to have an argument. It takes one person to stop that argument. So a mastermind group works very well. It allows us to, goblins are having to can't walk around too much. And I guess it's the speaker right here that doesn't feedback. Mastermind group works quite well, and it's something that you can do in this church, small groups. If you have a problem, you have an old thought that you have trouble getting over, it allows you to see it in a different light. And it lets you live from that place of inside out. You need to be in the flow. Live life in the flow. And a mastermind group can help you do that. God said, or Jesus said this, and God might have put it through him. We will have tribulations. And this is in John 16:33. We will have tribulations, but I have overcome the world. What is it to overcome the world? It's starting to see life differently. It's starting to live life differently. The process is difficult. What's a second tool you can use? Meditation. Go inside. Draw your attention to the inside. Now, there's a study that was done by a neurologist that said consistent meditation for a long time consistently would change your brain physically. You would start to take in more positive messages, and you would start not taking in negative ones. They studied Buddhist meditators and Catholic meditators. The Catholic nuns would do contemplative types of meditation. Buddhist meditation is very different because you stay cognizant the whole time. But one very striking thing about both of these is they both were consistent. They both did it every day. And they both did it for over an hour a day. Now, how do you get to an hour a day? Well, you simply take a step in that direction every single step. You start with 2 minutes a day. Then you go to 3 minutes a day. Then you go to 4 minutes a day. You have to be patient with yourself. But once you get to a certain point, you can meditate for as long as you're willing to set your timer for. Meditation allows you to be inside and live life from that inside place. It allows you to be who you are in a lot of different situations because it changes your mind about everything. You start to see the opportunities because self-awareness that you develop allows you to see God's divine mind messages to you. You start to become aware of it. You see, divine mind comes into is a big thing. It's a big idea. And I'll give you an example. When I was the treasurer at Unity of Richmond back in 2011, I was on the board. I had a furnace that was a 1930s coal-burning furnace that was costing us $700 a month year-round for fuel. And we had a sign that was rotted and falling down. So I took it upon myself, the big idea that I had was to replace both of them. When I went to the plumbing company, 9 different boards had already been there. And they brought out a folder with all 9 submissions for cost analysis. That's all I was asking for. But I hadn't figured out yet how I was going to make it happen. Because like most community churches, we don't make enough money to pay cash for this all the time. There are some that can. We were not in that space. We were not in that consciousness. So I decided to do it a different way. I went to my minister, Richard Bunch, and I asked him, what was the guidelines that our bank, Wells Fargo, used to establish loans to church? He said that they had very strict ideas about how you would do that. So I proceeded to call all 28 banks in the city of Richmond and interviewed them about what were their lending practices. I found one that wanted to do our business. So I went back to Richard and I said, why don't we switch our account to this bank? When we did, it took 3 months to do this, so it's not an easy transfer. They came to our office at the church and we wrote out the contract for the loan for the furnace and the sign. Funny thing happened when we paid that loan off. They came back to us and offered us to finance our capital campaign to renovate our church. See, faith goes a long way. Being open to prosperity ideas means that you get a big idea and you have to be creative in how you deal with it. It is your creativity that works here. God doesn't just give you the idea and lay out all the plans. You co-create what you could co-create. Being self-aware means that you're open to that idea. And you're open to be creative and working through that idea. It's not God's going to give you a car. It's not physical. That's outside to Him. God gives you the way to produce that car. Through your thoughts. Third principle of unity says, thoughts held in mind produce outcome. They produce more thoughts. You can think that you have cancer, but you're not going to give yourself cancer in that moment. It doesn't materialize that way. Or even think you're going to have a car. God's not going to just boop, put it in your front yard or put it in your driveway. You have to make that happen. Now there's a third way of using tools to bring about change in your life. And that's affirmative prayer. Affirmative prayer changes us, not the situation or the problem you're praying about. Affirmative prayer can be done daily, consistently, and every day. If you have a prayer team, they give you an affirmative prayer every time they call you. You can call Silent Unity and get an affirmative prayer about any situation if you need one in a given situation. And they'll have thousands and thousands of people praying for you. Affirmative prayer works well when you have to change your mind about that situation. When you're open to the possibilities in your life becomes better. Becomes more active. You become more loving. We don't have to love our neighbor in the sense that our neighbor's not lovable. Just love them where they are. Love them where they are. You don't have to receive a loving response back from them to love them. That's in your purview to see it. As I said, there's no ascribed arguments that we have about any situation. We don't have to get mad. We simply have to accept the situation and bless them. That's them. Sometimes we have to be away from them. We can still love them. Just like my sister. I loved her. And she loved me. It was her way of showing it. All of us have within us the ability to do meditation, to start a mastermind group, and to have a fervent prayer session. Let me give you an example that was in an article I read on self-awareness from Robert Brummett out at Unity Village. He said, when I said hello to a friend, and she didn't say anything back to me. I noticed I felt angry. How could she be so inconsiderate? Not to even mention, think of me as in a way that I could be okay with that. But there's another way to look at this. When you examine your anger, you know that at the heart of it is hurt. You were hurt. You were hurt that they did not respond to you in a way that seemed loving and acceptable. And in that hurt, you can examine it. You don't have to judge it. You don't have to analyze it. You don't have to do anything. You simply observe it. You know, there are some other ways we can make the meaning of that response show up. Maybe she didn't hear us. Or maybe she was preoccupied. We don't always have to go to the most negative thing, but we do as humans, don't we? With a little bit of information, we tend to make the most negative outcome possible. How many people have stayed up nights worrying about something that was done at work, which you said? And did it happen that way? No, it doesn't. We have to be willing to see life differently and be aware of our actions and aware of our emotions, aware of our thoughts that we ascribe to those thoughts. You know, maybe sometimes the idea is that we're overweight. We don't love ourselves because we need to lose weight. Or we don't have loving relationships. Or our kids are very hard to get along with. Use the same ideas that you use for everything else. Mastermind, meditation, affirmative prayer. You change your thoughts about it. And like I said, you have the third principle. You can produce any thoughts you want. Let it happen. Let it be who you are. Show up in the world, and the world will change before you. To a positive, loving, acceptable, beautiful experience. We do not have to live life the way we've always lived it. We can let it happen. We have to be willing to let it happen. Examine your thoughts. Examine your feelings. And strive to see it differently. If you watch the news, that's something this country needs. To start to see life differently. We can do this as a society. We can do this in our families. We can do this at our work. We can do this because we're capable and we're loving and we are divine. We're divine. How many people have trouble saying that I am God? It's all right.
No, I have no trouble. I was going to respond to you.
In a different way.
I would just say, I know.
You are a divine spirit.
I am the universe.
Yes, thank you. When we know that we live life from that aspect, that person we didn't love as a neighbor, we love. That child who's being indifferent to us, we love. That person at work that complains about you all the time, we love. We let it happen. And life becomes beautiful and fulfilling and loving and great. Life lived from within to without is how we do it. And that is how I see it. And that's what self-awareness is. Being willing to see it. Being willing to take it in. Being willing to know that it's the truth. Namaste.